So my informative speech is on the opioid crisis. The opioid crisis has been getting worse, with overdose deaths nearly doubling in the past 10 years. This can be shown on the graph. As you can see, in 2009, there were just over 38,000 overdose deaths, and by 2019, there was over 70,000. The opioid crisis began in 1999 and can best be described in three phases. The three phases are prescription opioid overdose, heroin overdose, and synthetic opioid overdose. Opioid overdoses occur in all age groups over 18 years old at about the same rate, but are most prevalent between the ages of 24 and 35 years old. The epidemic was said to begin after doctors started overprescribing to resolve pain, but over the years, these highly addictive chemicals had users turning to heroin and eventually turning to synthetic opioids like fentanyl to reach euphoria at a cheaper price. The first wave of the opioid epidemic began in 1999 when doctors began heavily prescribing opioids. Pharmaceutical companies reassured the medical community that patients would not become addicted to prescription opioid pain relievers, and healthcare providers began to prescribe them at greater rates. Increased prescription of opioid medications led to widespread misuse of both prescription and non-prescription opioids. Roughly 21 to 29% of patients prescribed opioids have witnessed chronic pain from misusing them. As someone in the medical field, I've witnessed firsthand patients going out of their way to seem hurt so they can be prescribed opioids. The overprescription of opioids that started this epidemic in the 90s has mellowed out because the minimum criteria to be prescribed opioids is more difficult than it used to be, but there are still some addicts that find a way to manipulate the system in their favor. Because health officials began to realize that overprescribing opioids was contributing to the crisis, they cut down how much they were prescribing. However, because it became more difficult to receive a prescription, many users began to transition to heroin. The increase of heroin overdose began in 2010 and was caused by people who originally abused prescription opioids. The National Institute on Drug Abuse estimates 4 to 6% of people who misuse prescription opioids transition to heroin. The rise in the distribution of heroin in the streets allowed for easier access for opioid addicts to reach euphoria. Euphoria is often used to describe the feeling that you get after consumption of opioids, which is defined as an extreme, unrealistic feeling of physical, emotional well-being. There are ways to purchase illegally obtained prescription opioids off the streets, but have a much bigger price tag than heroin. This easier access and cheaper price is why about 80% of heroin users first misused prescription opioids. Heroin deaths steadily grew from 2010 until 2016 when the deaths started to plateau. However, 2016 is when the number of synthetic opioid-laced deaths surpassed the non-laced heroin deaths, and that can be shown in this graph down here. You can see the dark blue line is non-laced heroin deaths, and the yellow is laced heroin. And so between 2016 and 2017 is when those passed each other. The third and current wave of the opioid crisis started in 2013 with the increase in synthetic overdose deaths. The most common synthetic opioid involved in these overdoses is fentanyl. There are two types of fentanyl. There's pharmaceutical fentanyl and illicitly manufactured fentanyl. Pharmaceutical fentanyl is prescribed by doctors to treat severe pain, especially after surgery or for advanced stage cancer. However, most recent cases of fentanyl-related overdose are linked to illicitly manufactured fentanyl, which is distributed through illegal drug markets for its heroin-like effect. It is often added to other drugs because of its extreme potency, which makes drugs cheaper, more powerful, more addictive, and more dangerous. Fentanyl is 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. For reference, This is the penny, a single penny compared to a lethal dose of fentanyl. And this picture demonstrates the lethal dose of heroin compared to the lethal dose of fentanyl and carfentanil, which the difference can clearly be seen. Today, fentanyl and other synthetic opioids are the most common drugs involved in overdose deaths. Even in small doses, it can be deadly. Over 150 people die every day from overdoses related to synthetic opioids like fentanyl. If we don't do something soon, these numbers will continue to grow. The opioid epidemic started with doctors overprescribing opioids in the late 90s, followed by addicts who transitioned to heroin, and now we are in a period in which fentanyl and other synthetic opioids are the leading cause of overdose deaths. It is not easy for people addicted to opioids to stop, but carrying naloxone, commonly known as Narcan, can prevent a witnessed overdose from resulting in death. Naloxone is only a temporary fix for an overdose, and medical attention is still necessary. However, these near-death experiences are not always enough to halt an addict from continual drug use. I had a childhood friend that suffered from addiction in high school, and he even had a few close situations where he had to be transported to the hospital. Not enough was done to help him during these hard times, and he eventually passed due to a bad batch he received that was laced with heroin or fentanyl. Sorry. In many cases, the first step to preventing someone from overdosing is simply talking to them and getting them the help they need before it's too late. My friend Cody is dearly missed by our close-knit friend group, and I wish we could have done more to help. But I want everyone that hears his story to not make the same mistake that we all made on hesitating to get professional help. And this is the shirt that my friends and I designed to remember Cody, and we always wear it this time of year. Thank you.
All right. Good work in your presentation.
Thank you.
I want to say that was a really good use on your visuals. I really liked how you pointed out every single one individually when time called for it, especially the one that I thought was most shocking was the lethal dose of fentanyl use.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Mhm.
Um, Overall, you were very fluent. I mean, you did have a couple of hiccups, but I
Yeah.
think that just happens to be stumbling. You transitioned well from one segment to another, which I thought was very well done. One thing that I did kind of catch on, I don't know if you had enough, but your citations, did you include them?
Yeah. Uh, uh, um, well, no, I didn't say them. No, I didn't.
Oh, that's gonna be a hit.
Oh,
Just so
really?
you're tracking. Yeah, you're more or less it's one of the things that the professor actually requires is like you physically have to say them. You have to physically say the in-text citations.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I think I'll be all right.
All right.
So that's it, right?
I think outside of that, yeah, that's
All
pretty
right.
much it.
Thank you.